Night Network presents Football Time.
Hey, and welcome to the Football Time Show. The divisional playoff round is in the books, and what a round it was. Some of the best playoff games, definitely best playoff games in a group I think we've seen in a long time. A lot of walk-offs. All walk-offs, in fact. You don't get that very often. I think it definitely made up for a sort of disappointing wild card weekend with this great play over the divisional playoffs. So really fun weekend. What'd you make of the weekend, Achilles?
Oh, as you said, man, it came down to the last play on every single game. I don't think that I remember the last time that ever happened, but it made for a great divisional round.
Yeah, definitely so. We'll get right into these games. Before we kick off the games, a little bit of news with the Saints coach stepping down, the other day. I think there was starting to be some rumors and stuff about him maybe getting a little burnt out, not wanting to do this. His name flew around in a couple extra jobs. What do you think Sean Payton is going to do here? I tend to think he probably will take this year off. He's probably not going to take one of those free jobs that opens up. But nonetheless, what'd you make of the situation with the Saints and Sean Payton here before we get into the games?
I mean, listen, that's definitely a blow to the gut. If you're, part of the Saints organization or their fan base, he's obviously one of the most talented coaches, probably one of the brightest minds in football. Whether you like him or hate him, there's no denying the fact that he's definitely one of the best coaches that was in the league. And I think that now that he's stepped down, because he didn't call it a retirement, he made very clear that he wasn't calling it a retirement. He was stepping down. I think he's just burnt out, as you said. And we've seen it over the last couple of seasons. You've seen, just in his physique, his personal appearance, you could see that it was starting to take a toll on him. So I think he made it pretty clear that his next goal is to do TV of some sort. I'm assuming that he'll probably cling on to the NFL Network or ESPN and probably become a play-by-play analyst or something like that within the actual football network. So I think that there's still a lot for him to do, and who knows, maybe the itch to return to coaching comes back at some point. But as of now, I think he's pretty burnt out, and it's understandable.
Yeah, definitely. So it'll be interesting to see if, he does pop back or he goes sort of the Bill Cowher route, who sort of was burnt out there after winning that last Super Bowl with the Steelers. Sort of retired or stepped down, got the job with CBS to be a, talking head pundit, and found out that you can get paid millions of dollars by showing up once a week talking football for 2 hours and then going home, and life was a lot simpler and funner, and never really got back in coaching. His name got floated in there, a handful of times, but Bill hasn't, sort of re-scratched that itch. So I'm curious if, he's one of these that takes, a couple months off, and then the coaching bug starts to get the itch, and he's starting to make noise and get back in, or he sort of goes, oh, this is a pretty decent lifestyle here. I get paid to talk football once a week, and then I get to enjoy my life. So I'll be interested to see that. If I was Mike McCarthy, I think I'd be a little nervous. So going into the next season, I don't know how long that leash will be with Sean Payton dangling out there for the Dallas Cowboys, who have certainly had a interest in him basically since he started with the Saints there.
Yeah, it definitely will be interesting. I do see a little stark differences between some of the coaches that are doing TV now and Sean Payton. A lot of these other coaches, they're really good coaches. Obviously, it's one of the reasons why they transitioned to TV, but they didn't have that scheming, game planning, itch that I see from Coach. I feel like he's got that. He loves to put together plays. He loves to design things. He's almost like a mad scientist in the lab. And whereas some of these other coaches was more a love for coaching the game itself. So there's differences there, and I'd be interested to see what happens in the long term. But for now, goodbye. I won't miss him being this. The fact that he was in the NFC, but I'm sure that there's teams that are definitely going to keep a close eye on him.
Yeah, the Saints might miss him though. I think that one's going to be a long rebuilding project. I looked the other day; they're 61 million over the cap going into next season. So I think that's going to have to be a complete teardown. I don't know how appealing that job is. A couple weeks back we ranked the job market. Basically, our whole lifetime, the Saints haven't been a good football team. It's just been in this little, 10 to 15 year window with Payton and Breeze there that they've been really good. How entertaining do you think, or seriously, would you take this job if you were a coach who wanted to latch on to the Saints here? Do you look at it as something that you could get your teeth in, or do you look at this as a complete rebuild? I'm going to be fired in 3 years when we, win 4 games.
Well, see, I don't think that it's a bad situation. We've seen just from the tenure that he had with the Saints that they're not a team that's just going to willy-nilly cut you. Now, he did have a lot of success while he was there, so maybe that played into it, obviously. But it does feel like the Saints franchise, as of the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era, became a longevity type of destination where if you go there and you perform well, you know that you're pretty much guaranteed to have a job until you don't want it anymore. But as you mentioned, this is going to be a rebuild situation where you got to blow the whole thing up. And I don't know who has the confidence or the patience to start from scratch. But there's definitely people who are into that type of coaching. That's their style of coaching. They like the rebuild process. So there's definitely going to be some suitors out there, but it's definitely going to be a tricky situation in New Orleans going forward, having to really revamp that whole roster.
Yeah, I think the ownership situation might be a little interesting too. It's more the Pelicans that are thrown about getting sold, but the Benson, the widow who owns the team, isn't what we'd call wealthy, but she's not one of those who is wealthy where like her wealth comes mostly from owning these two franchises, not from, sort of outside the
she's not a Stan Kroenke.
Yes, she's not Stan Kroenke, where Stan Kroenke could basically lose the Rams and for nothing and still would be a very rich and wealthy man, whereas a lot of their wealth, like a lot of the old sort of school football owners, is sort of tied to their actual franchise. So I definitely heard a lot of things about the Pelicans, who the Benson widow also owns, but there have been a little rumblings about the Saints selling as well. So anytime there's a change of ownership, that's a little interesting to sort of sink your teeth into as well. All right, enough about the non-playoffs. Let's get into the playoffs. Let's kick off with the first game of the weekend. The Bengals went to the Tennessee Titans, won it 19-16. Really, other than the Bills-Chiefs, this was actually probably the sort of closest game throughout, where both teams looked, basically pretty much even, throughout the game, and nobody really got up on anybody in the game too much. You knew it was going to be a mistake here or there in the balance that was going to determine it, and it was the Titans who made all those mistakes really here, other than a interesting, I will say, interception. Somehow you are basically have control of the ball when you have your two hands on the side of it and the point is sticking in the ground. Not quite sure how that one works out, but hey, nonetheless, wide receivers have to hold on to it for 20 minutes and take 15 steps. D-backs just have to somehow have their hands on it, and it's okay. But turnovers really decided this game. I thought it was an interesting game plan by the Bengals. They sort of tightened the Titans here, where they made very few mistakes. They let the other team make mistakes, and then when they made those mistakes, they capitalized on them. They didn't do anything flashy. They had a couple big plays here and there off, play action and, some freeing up of some receivers. But interesting. The Titans sort of got tightened here by the Cincinnati Bengals in this game.
Yeah, listen, it was definitely an interesting matchup. And it was also interesting at the Achilles household, because we had the crew over. We had Off-Road Cleveland. We had Dynamite Dave. We had, obviously, champ. We had everybody here. We're all watching the game as Dynamite was nervously sitting in the corner with his leg shaking, as it was a much tighter game than everybody anticipated. I thought it was going to be a close game. Ultimately, like you said, it came down to the mistakes. There was just too many mistakes for Tennessee for them to be able to overcome. But I still think that we do have to give them some credit. The fact that they had that bye week where they, basically didn't see any football action. And then you get a hot team in the Cincinnati coming into your town. And, the whole dialogue back and forth is this the new kid, the new sheriff basically in town. And he sure played a good football game, but Tennessee also did not let up. They made a lot of mistakes, but they stayed within that game. As we mentioned in the opening, all 4 games came down to the last play of the game. So I think that we have to give some credit here to Tennessee after all the adversity they dealt with all season long, to come in and play pretty bad, but still have enough grit and determination to stay in the game. I think it's something to at least give them some credit for. So I will say that I will give him some credit. A.J. Brown had a monster game. I think Derrick Henry probably came back a week too soon. But overall, listen, congratulations, Cincinnati. They're moving on. This is the first time in franchise history that they get a road playoff win. I believe they were 0-7 prior to that. So it was a huge moment for them. The 4 seed beats the number 1 seed, and they're moving on to the AFC divisional round, divisional championship now.
Yeah, definitely so. All right. Let's get into some key points in this game. I want your opinion on them. First, let's get into Derrick Henry. You mentioned it. You thought he maybe came back a week too early. I don't think you had much of a choice. If he was semi-healthy, you were probably going to bring him back. My question on this is, I thought he looked really good in the first half and then started to wear down in the second half. And we'll get into a couple other, running backs who had missed long absences and then I think looked fatigued, didn't look, quite all the way fit for these games, and this was one of them. And, we kept having Dynamite going, well, it's the fourth quarter. This is when he's going to get going. And it sort of was the opposite. He seemed to have a lot of energy early and sort of tired down of late, which, he hasn't played football in, about 12 weeks here. That's to be expected. So my question is, Deontay Foreman had 4 carries for 66 yards. I don't quite understand, while someone who was successful for you, why Derrick Henry wasn't there, why there wasn't more of a split there, especially when you started to see Henry not really gaining those yards in the second half that he usually does.
Listen, I'm going to put this on the coaching, okay? Now, this whole game, I blamed it basically pretty much on Tannehill with the mistakes he made. But going away from that, I think that was a poor choice. I think that was one of the biggest reasons why this game went the way it did. And I'm going to blame the head coaches for that because, listen, I understand Derrick Henry is the king. I understand that, he was leading the league by many, many yards when he was actually healthy prior to getting hurt. And he was probably going to be the rushing yards leader for the season. But he got banged up. Okay, you can't predict that and you can't change it. He came back after, what a lot of people assumed was a season-ending injury, that he wouldn't come back, which was miraculous in itself. But he wasn't completely healthy, and he hadn't been able to get on the field and actually do football drills. I know he practiced the week of, but it's not the same thing to practice 1 week and then get into a playoff game against a playoff caliber team that's hungry. It's just really hard to do. And I go back to those stats that Dynamite David kept sending us throughout the regular season and the playoffs. The Titans were just as successful at rushing the ball when they were using their other running backs while Henry was hurt. Yes, they ran the ball a little bit more because they had to, because these guys aren't home run hitters like Derrick Henry is. And they were having success. So I don't understand why you'd go away from a formula that's working. They got the number 1 seed for a reason. Derrick Henry wasn't there for half the season. So these guys had to have played a role in that number 1 seed. And I think that they should have focused more on using them, utilizing them properly. I understand using him because if you have him, you have to use him. He's a home run hitter. But if you watch the game, that's one thing he lacked. Dynamite David was right. He is a fourth quarter grinder. He'll grind you down, and then before you know it, he's going to break off on a huge run where he stiff arms a defender and gets away for a huge touchdown. That was not the case in this game. He was slowly, losing fuel as the game progressed, and it wasn't the Derrick Henry that we're used to seeing. Yes, he looked buff, he looked fit, but he was in football shape. He wasn't in football shape. That's all it was. I think they really, as opposed to giving him what they give him 20 carries for 62 yards at a 3.1 average, which is not horrible, but you had Foreman who got 4 carries, 66 yards for a 16.5 average. Now I know that there was, big chunk plays there, which, kind of dilutes the average a little bit, but he looked like the better running back. I don't understand the point of trying to force Henry into a game where he's really not ready to play. There's too much on the line during the playoffs to take a gamble like that. So I blame the coach for that.
Yeah, I think we'll get into that too. I thought this was a really, really poor coach game by Mike Vrabel, who, basically I had him and, Mike Tomlin as my two sort of coach of the year candidates here. And I just thought he sort of got outsmarted by the Cincinnati Bengals and Zach Taylor here in this game. You mentioned it. They gave Henry 20 carries. I just don't understand why you can't reduce that to 15 carries. Give, 6 more carries to Deontay Foreman, see what he does. And maybe bring in Henry on short yardage situations. We'll get down to that 3rd and 4th down call in a second. I'm going to touch on the 2-point conversion. I'm not going to hammer it too much. But I will say in the second quarter at, it's 6-0. Basically, you can make it 7-6. And because they jumped off sides and you get an extra yard, you decide to go for 2. I thought a little bit unnecessary, especially since I think the percentage is like 49% from the 1-yard line than it is from, the 2-yard line and stuff. So I don't know the percentage jump is all that great. And then, of course, what I really have the problem with is, of course, always the play call on the 2-point conversion. They do that thing where they shift, the line, make a strong side a weak side, and leave, a defensive end basically unblocked from the opposite side they're going to run. And, of course, that defensive end who is unblocked comes storming in and, crashes up the play. And I never quite understand that, but I just thought it was a little early to, start doing math and score charts when you can make it 7-6 at that point, and even more so the play call on that.
Yeah, definitely. Listen, in my opinion, it was definitely a little too early for try and go for a 2-point conversion and take a commanding 8-0 lead. But I guess when it comes down to it, some coaches are really all about the analytics. And I know the percentages aren't great, as you mentioned, but I think that having Derrick Henry back, playoff, first playoff game as the number 1 seed, I think all these things kind of came into play. It's no longer just about analytics. It's also about atmosphere and feel of the moment. And I think that's the reason they attempted it. I don't hate it, but I also don't love it. I don't think there's a reason to try to do more than what you have to do, which is literally just, play good defense, which they did. Their defense had 9 sacks total. So, turnovers and sacks. This game was actually a defensive struggle for the most part, which a lot of people didn't really anticipate. But, they did a really good job defensively. So I don't understand why you take such a big gamble. Now, I understand that 1 point is not 2 points, didn't really make the game. They ended up losing by 3 points. So they still lose by 1 point if you were successful in that 2-point conversion. But I don't like the call. I feel like it just really shifts momentum.
Yes.
You kick the extra point, then go back to the other side of the field and kick the ball off. You're up 7-0 at this point. Number 1 seed, Derrick Henry back. You're at home. I feel like it changes things, the dynamic of the game. So I don't hate it, but I also don't like it.
Yeah, I can't, pile on too much. It just seems like you were going to kick the extra point, and then because you gained 1 yard and you took a conversion from 2 yards to 1 yard, you altered your whole thinking because of a 1 yard uptick. And then, percentage-wise, it doesn't even, increase the probability all that much. So you're left with a point not out there, not that big a deal. Like I said, I think play call more than anything always tends to bug me more here. And I didn't like that play call. I never like sort of leaving edge rushers who are built to crash plays like that unblocked. Just sort of drives me a little nuts. But I want to get into the real big play that I thought turned this whole thing around. The Titans are driving down, and they got a 3rd and 1. for first off, they send Tannehill in the shotgun, which it drives me. It's been a pet peeve, I think, basically since this has become the swag thing of on 3rd and 1 you run out of the shotgun. So basically, you turn a 3rd and 1 into a 3rd and 4 or 5. But then to pile on, you're running a read option play with Tannehill there. That play gets blown up. You lose, 2-3 yards. You turn it into a 4th down at midfield. That gets stopped running Derrick Henry, who, at that point was not chewing up yardage. I can't hate the play because, I'd probably say 90% of the time he hits that. But because of that 3rd down play, it led to having to, run a big 4th down play. Bengals stepped up, got the stop when I think the Titans sort of had, ready to run that game out. Granted, the Titans defense got the stop after that, but it pulled more time off the clock, which I think in turn forced Tannehill to start having to pass the ball in that last drive series to try to A, not give the Bengals the ball back, trying to get first downs, and B, trying to get down there far enough to kick the game-winning field goal, which he forces the pass into the interception, which then leads to the Bengals. So I just thought that series and basically that play call, which just seemed, I don't know, it seemed arrogant. A little bit. Let's go in shotgun. Let's be cute and not just hand the ball off to Derrick Henry on 3rd and 1, get that first down. Let's try some fancy read option and see if we can blow up a big play here. That was really sort of the crux of the game, I thought. Those two plays right there.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. And, again, this all comes back down to what? The coaching. And I'm not a huge fan of the Tennessee coach. He just kind of rubs me the wrong way, and a lot of it has to do with just his mannerisms. And you said the key word there, arrogance. This is how he comes off to me and how he's always come off to me. Now I don't know him personally, and I've never had to really dive into his coaching career, obviously, other than just kind of covering games, but. He rubs me off as an arrogant coach. And listen, he's got every right to. He was a great player, obviously. He won championships, and he's had success as a coach. So he whatever he wants to behave like, that's totally his deal. But he that's how he rubs me off as a casual fan who's not a Tennessee fan, who just watches games where he happens to be on the sidelines. That's how he comes off. And then, again, I go back to that overusing Derrick Henry. You go back to going for that 2-point conversion, go for trying to run, out of the shotgun on 3rd and 1. I feel like these are all arrogant. Yeah, exactly. I feel like these are all arrogant moves. And not that I could be completely wrong. He could be the most humble person in the world. He just has that arrogant look about him. And again, I just have to blame the coaching for this. Obviously the mistakes on the field, you put those on the players for making those mistakes. But the mistakes that lead to these mistakes have to be, on the coach, because he puts the game plan, he puts together the schemes, and he puts the personnel out there. So I got to blame the coach for all that.
Yeah, definitely so. Just interesting play call. We'll go to the last we'll call it series and a half, because the Bengals ran a couple plays to get into field goal range. But Titans get the ball back off that aforementioned, turning it over on downs. Bengals, can't gain any yardage, have to punt it back to the Titans there. They get the ball 1st and 10 on the Tennessee 16 with about 2:43 left, and the Titans are left sort of in that situation where they want to go fast, but they don't want to go too fast and sort of leave the Bengals with the ball. So I thought play calling was a little bit weird here. They ran a play, work it down to the 2-minute warning, hit a couple solid pass plays, and they're right, in and around, midfield field goal range, where they're a couple plays off, and they really started milking the clock. They let Derrick Henry right tackle from that 35-yard line, a short little swing pass to Hilliard for 5 yards, which puts you in 3rd and 5 with about 20 seconds left. And at the 35-yard line, you aren't quite in range to really be aggressive and go after a field goal, but you also don't want to give the ball to the Bengals, so you run sort of a mid-tier pass play to try to get that first down, and Tannehill, who basically played poor all season long. Forces a pass into, Westbrook Akina, who I have to question that decision making. First off, if you're going to go down, how about we force a pass into A.J. Brown or Julio Jones? You're basically forcing a pass into your third, fourth receiver on the depth chart here, and it gets picked off, and Cincinnati gets the ball back about, 20 or so yards away from field goal territory. They hit one or two nice plays with Chase, and, hell of a field goal by Evan McPherson, 52 yards in a walk-off sort of playoff situation. Nothing to, shake your head like that's going to be automatic, but just, once again, interesting sort of decisions, play calling, and clock management that led to that interception that gave the Bengals a real chance. It seemed like they didn't know quite what to do, whether just to sort of play for the tie or be aggressive and go for the win there.
Listen, we talked pretty much about this Cincinnati Bengals offensive line prior to this game, and we talked about how, one of the keys to the game was Tennessee's front seven actually getting pressure on Joe Burrow by attacking this hobbled offensive line. And, we didn't really take into consideration the fact that this was the first matchup where both quarterbacks were the most sacked quarterbacks in the regular season. I believe Burrow had 51 sacks and Tannehill had 47, if I'm not mistaken. It obviously played a big factor to it because teams were able to get pressure on these quarterbacks and they were able to make mistakes. Now, obviously, the most obvious mistakes were from Tannehill because they were in big situations that cost pretty much the game. But, also I think we got to give some credit here to McPherson. I believe he was the first kicker ever in NFL history to have at least 4 field goals made in a game in back-to-back playoff games. So, for being a rookie in high-pressure situations, where this team has never really been before, to come on the clutch, I thought was pretty huge also.
Yeah, definitely so. All right, so that's the Cincinnati-Tennessee game, ending in a walk-off for the Cincinnati Bengals. And a win, and a trip to the conference championship game. We'll move to the NFC side of things. We'll drop the temperature basically to 0 here, and I think it got colder as the night progressed. Of the games that went on in the divisional round here, this one was probably the least entertaining. It did lead to a walk-off, but nonetheless, not much went on here. I think my offensive summary for the 49ers is going to be a really good third down run by Deebo Samuel for 7 yards and a nice 13-yard slant route by Kittle on one drive at the end of the game, which is basically all this was. I don't really even know how to sum this game up because Packers come out, make a great drive in the first series, get touchdown, go 7-0. Basically, the 49ers, the whole game, can't move the ball, but those first couple series, they were basically in negative yard territories. Go a quick 3-and-out. Packers get the ball, start driving down again, and you think it's stupid to say, the third series of the game probably is really the key of the series, but that Mercedes Lewis fumble, the Packers are probably going down and scoring, again, 14-0. This game's essentially over, especially with the way San Francisco was played. They didn't get that. Niners got the ball. Of course, didn't do anything with it, but, it just seemed after that, all the momentum was sucked out of the game. The weather was getting worse and worse. And then, basically by the second half, it was going to be really, really difficult for either offense to sustain, long drives, and I think both teams got so conservative that they didn't even want to attempt long drives because they were scared there was going to be some sort of turnover that, flipped the game. Of course, we'll get into it, but there was a turnover. It's Green Bay's special teams that basically flipped the whole game for them a little bit. I will get into Green Bay's offense and Aaron Rodgers. I want a deeper conversation there, but what'd you make of this game, San Francisco, Green Bay?
Listen, I know it was a low scoring affair, and it was probably a bit of a back and forth as far as like defensive prowess and offensive struggles is concerned. But still an entertaining game, another walk off game here, and I don't know who, but I believe somebody on this show probably calls San Francisco getting an upset in this one. But we won't get into that right now. This is the first time since 2010 where both number one seeds have been eliminated.
Did you have the play of the blocked punt for a touchdown and the blocked field goal that
I think it's on here somewhere. I'll have to look through it, but listen, we'll get into that later. San
Francisco's going to score no offensive touchdowns and win this football game in Green Bay.
Listen, you said it, man. Conservative football. Now, we knew it was going to be cold. We knew the temperature was going to be frigid. But one thing I didn't anticipate was the weather getting worse as the game progressed, and that's exactly what happened. And they completely switched from being a let's try to get offense out there, and this just the defense being better to let's just get conservative and see what happens. Because Jimmy Garoppolo, 11 of 19, 131 yards and interception. Aaron Rodgers, 225 yards, no touchdowns. Aaron Rodgers, you're probably more than likely the MVP winner of the regular season. No touchdowns in a postseason game, number one seed. Going up against basically a 6th seed coming in.
Yes,
it's bonkers, man. And I know you want to talk about Aaron Rodgers a little bit more, but listen, I talked about how San Francisco had a good chance of winning this game. They had the right type of build to affect a team like Green Bay, and we've seen it pretty much every single time they face each other in the playoffs. They just were more physical on defense, and they just made more plays on special teams. That's really the key here with special teams. I think that if you look at offense and defense, it's kind of a nil situation there. They kind of, balance each other out. But special teams is where I think the biggest impact was made. And unfortunately for Green Bay, San Francisco showed up and they didn't.
Yeah.
Special teams wise.
We'll get in the special teams conversation. By now, at least, I assume everybody knows Green Bay had the worst special teams in the league, which isn't quite always a death knell, but it definitely proved to be in this game. What I don't understand is, it's like basic special teams stuff. You go back to that field goal at the end of the half off the big play from Aaron Jones. Basically a rusher is left unblocked. So schematically, you're wrong there. Same thing for the punt. Somebody misses assignment. That's what I don't understand. Basically, all these specialty guys on the roster are there for special teams and practice special teams. So how you're missing assignments in, a divisional playoff game, it's just confusing to me. That's basically unacceptable. That goes one to the special teams coach and then, climbs its way up to the ladder to the head coach who allows this to go on. That's like college football stuff, missing assignments and losing games in an NFL a professional football setting because you're missing assignments. And then, it didn't factor really, but even that last kick by Robbie Gould, they only had 10 men on the freaking field.
Yeah, I know.
Granted, the 11th wasn't going to block the field goal, I doubt, but it just shows
that's besides the point though. Yeah. I'm sure you're about to get into it. It just shows the level of incompetence on special teams because yes, listen, you probably weren't going to block that field goal. But listen, the 49ers did. They were able to block one.
Yep.
What's to say that you're not going to? You put your team up in a you're talking about the number one seed. This isn't the beginning of the season, where we can make a mistake. Like, listen, they'll clean it up. We're in the playoffs. They had an entire season to fix this, and they didn't do it. They were the number one seed because of Aaron Rodgers and that offense. And that defense stepped up every now and then, but it was because of that offense. How you don't fix these issues that you're dealing with that are obvious, is one of the reasons why you are no longer in the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely so. I just that last one doesn't affect it, but it goes to the whole mindset that led to the things that did affect the game. The block punt leading to the touchdown, which basically gave San Francisco, the tied game, and the blocked field goal right before the half, which would have given Green Bay a 10-0 lead, which at that point I think also would have been basically, not a chance for San Francisco to come back. I think at any point if Green Bay had gotten out to a 2-score lead, there was no chance San Francisco was going to be able to put together, a drive over 40 yards. They basically had to find ways to steal points, and the Packers let them find ways to steal points in this one.
Yeah, listen, now you've got to, like I said, you're talking about a team that barely got into the playoffs, and a lot of people didn't give them a shot. But now Aaron Rodgers is 0-4 against San Francisco in the playoffs all time. Obviously, not the type of record that you want to deal with. And it raises a couple of big questions. The first big question is, what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers? What's the future hold for him? I think in the post-game conference, he openly spoke about how he's going to take some time to think about his options, but he'll definitely make a decision prior to, the franchise tag deadline, things like that. And I think that's pretty big of himself to not just give the team, but also the rest of his teammates, enough of a window to make decisions based off what his decision is going to be. So obviously that's pretty big, but we await to see what the news of that is. The next two bits of news that come out of this game is, what is Deebo Samuel's health coming into his next game, and what is George Kittle's health? Because Deebo Samuel is a baller. That dude is a baller, man. He is a football player. I know he plays wide receiver, and they use him as a running back, but that dude can play any position in football, man. I would gladly have that guy on my team. He plays hard, plays physical, and he doesn't care who's lining up next to him. Man, the dude's a beast. I love Deebo. He's a really good player, and I just hate the fact that we have to go up against him twice a year.
Yeah. I'm going to get into the Aaron Rodgers thing. He said he's going to make his decision. I've been on the Aaron Rodgers sort of bandwagon, and he'll stay in Green Bay. I think if I'm Green Bay, I think I'd probably cut bait. Not because he's going to be a bad quarterback. He's going to win any team, 11 to 13 games, no matter where he goes. But this is what we're getting in the playoffs. We've gotten it, 6 years in a row. It's always something. And then, I don't know if it's just this week, but it's entering sort of Kyrie Irving territory where he's going, I don't want to be, the main source of attention. And then basically he's on every sports talk radio show, running his mouth about this and that, and how everybody who was watching the game wanted them to lose. I'm like, how does that affect your offense? The TV viewers are affecting how you all play on offense. I mean, they had
his last possession. Sorry to cut you off again, but his last possession netted -6 yards.
That's what I was going to say.
MVP candidate, -6 yards.
That's what I was going to say. They had the ball 3 different times after that punt block where the Niners basically did nothing. They could have drove down, gotten a field goal. Probably not a field goal because Lord knows what would have happened there. But they could have gotten a score and put this game away. I think we both can agree the 49ers were not making long drives, from the 25-yard line into their territory with the way their offense was playing. He didn't do it, and I thought he, frankly, missed a couple throws there. And it just seems at this point, I think it's more hassle than what it's worth. You look at that division. I mean, if you could keep the rest of this team together, I don't know if Jordan Love's the answer, but if you bring in, some mid-tier quarterback, I mean, the Bears, I don't think are going to be contenders in this division. The Vikings are in a total rebuild, and the Detroit Lions, I think we can write off for the rest of our lifetime and probably a handful of lifetimes after that. So I think you can get away with dumping him, start this rebuild. Maybe if you really do trust Jordan Love, you go there. I think you enter the same territory as the rest of those teams with that one. But nonetheless, I think the hassle has sort of become more than what you're getting. Because basically you're getting 12, 13 wins and, a first or second round playoff exit with this team. It's just, we've seen it over and over. The same thing happens in every single playoff game here. And I just think it's probably time to cut bait here.
Listen, I have to agree with you to some extent. I don't think that not for the same reasons exactly, but you have to look at this from the upper brass viewpoint here in Green Bay. They invested a lot in Jordan Love. They think that was their next guy. What does it say about him if you keep Aaron Rodgers going forward, because I don't think you can keep him. You're going to have to pay him at some point. And it's going to cost too much money. There's just not enough cap room to keep both of those guys. And I think it also deteriorates his confidence level to see this guy, after so many different exits in the first or second round of the playoffs, again, basically keeping the job when you were brought in to do the job. So I think that's one of the reasons why you can't keep him. Another reason is if he goes, I think Devontae is going. I don't think he stays or he wants out. I don't know whether they can franchise tag him or not. I'm not up to date with his contract situation, but I don't think he's going to want to be there if Aaron Rodgers is not there. And if Aaron Rodgers is not there, Devontae Adams is not there, what else do you have? Love him or hate him, Aaron Rodgers is like a Tom Brady-esque type quarterback. He's going to make all the players around him better. And a lot of these players really aren't that great. We've seen them leave Green Bay, go on to what they believe is going to be greener pastures where they can be the guy. And what happens? They all come right back to Green Bay because they can't do anything anywhere else. The quarterback is driving that team. And yes, you do have basically a guaranteed playoff spot if Aaron Rodgers stays, but I think that you've ruined the rest of that franchise, the rest of that personnel, whether it starts in the quarterback room, going down from Jordan Love all the way down to third stringers and whatnot. But it's a bigger impact. It's like a wave that, trickles down to the rest of the personnel there. So I don't think it's in your best interest to keep him. I think it's in your best interest to last year. Would have been awesome. They could have got so much out of him. I believe Denver was offering basically the entire house to get him. I don't know if he would hold that type of value if he decides to play another year and you could send him somewhere else. I don't know how it's all going to work out, but I think that right now it worked best for both parties, Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, to probably split ways. Now, I know it sounds crazy to say who wants to split with Aaron Rodgers, but I think it's just in both of their best interests.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I'm going to hammer a little bit of his decision-making in this game as well. You mentioned he attempted 29 passes. 21 of those targets were Aaron Jones and Davante Adams. One to Alan Lazard, one to Randall Cobb, who he demanded he had to have for him to come back. So he was a real turning force there. He loved Randall Cobb so much he threw to him one time in this game. So he seemed just let's force the ball to Davante Adams. If that's not there, check down to Aaron Jones. I thought he was poor in this game. That doesn't mean he's going to be poor. And I guarantee you next season, if he's on this team or any other team, they're winning 12 to 13 games. It becomes, like I said, it's a little Kyrie Irving situation. Yeah, he'll score you 27 points every game, but how much of this do you really want to deal with? Every week it's always, something. On the other side of things, San Francisco gets through. I'm going to hammer Jimmy G a little bit with his F the Green Bay Packers and strutting around like he was at some point the reason the 49ers won this game. They've won 2 games in a row now in the playoffs despite Jimmy G, who's been awful, and he was terrible in this game. So much so that on 3rd and 7, from basically a place where you aren't going to kick a field goal, I doubt they were attempting a 55-yarder in the freezing cold with Robbie Gould. They were like, nah, let's not have Jimmy G throw the ball here. Let's hand the ball off to Deebo Samuel in hopes he gets 7 yards so we can get in field goal range. So they thought the perspective of punting to Aaron Rodgers was more conducive than having Jimmy G drop back and throw on a must-have 3rd and 7. So, Jimmy G can probably pipe it down a little bit here about his, worthiness of this team. This team is built on Elijah Mitchell, their running game, and Deebo Samuel, and a really, really good Deebo defensive line. Jimmy G sort of can make or go, I think, here.
Now, listen, we're going to play a little bit of good cop, bad cop here, okay? Obviously, you were just a good cop. No, I'm kidding. You were obviously the bad cop. So I'm going to be the good cop here, okay? So even though Jimmy Garoppolo's numbers are crazy, 11 of 19, 131 yards in that one interception I talked about, he walks around with swagger. Why does he walk around with swagger? Because he's a very lucky individual, okay? He was born with very good looks. He was born with enough talent that he got drafted into the NFL. And he was born with a lot of luck because even though he hasn't been playing, outstanding, his numbers aren't amazing for the year. Jimmy G is 21-6. That's 0.778% win percentage as a starter on the road. Okay. The 49ers have won 9 of their last 11 games after starting 3-5. So there's a reason why he walks around like that, because things just seem to work out for him. And, it's not always because of him, but he's around when they happen to work out. So it builds that confidence.
In spite of him.
Listen, I believe, what was that, Rick? I'm trying to remember.
I will say he made the one pass to Kittle on the third down before the Deebo Samuel run. Yes, he was capable of completing a slant pass to Kittle. So bully on him for there. They basically, like I said, the 49ers offense consisted of making a slant pass and a 7-yard run that won them the game.
But listen, the hero of the game here is Robbie Gould, right? He's the guy who kicked the game-winning field goal. He's the guy who basically kept them in the game. But Robbie Gould is 20 for 20 on field goal attempts in his career in the postseason, which is the most makes without a miss. So they've got him to add an extra swagger to Jimmy G. So don't expect Jimmy G to knock it down a few notches here.
Yeah, well, you can basically say Robbie Gould got him into the playoffs when he was punting to the Rams out of his own end zone, which I doubt he'd done very much, and he punts a pretty decent one. Granted, the Rams play calling on the preceding next 3 plays, I will question for the rest of my life, and we'll probably get into that on the Friday's or Saturday's show, that they're now playing a team that they could have not even had in the playoffs if they had done a couple things right on the last week of the season. But nonetheless, the 49ers move on. Before we go past this game, I don't think you could probably get rid of Matt LaFleur, considering he's won 13 games all 3 years in his row. But this team has been a dud 3 years in a row in the playoffs. Granted, 2 of those were in conference championship games. But I give a pass on that first year versus the 49ers. That team was a ridiculously good team. But last year playing that Tampa Bay Bucks team, I thought they were the better team. He decided to kick a field goal instead of go for a touchdown that would have won the team the game, and never saw the ball again. And then this week, the offensive genius, produced 10 points in this game. I don't think you can fire him, but if you're bringing Rodgers back, you have to at least stare at it a little bit and be like, what are we doing here in the playoffs? How much are these regular season wins worth here?
Listen, I will say this, okay? There's definitely the thought comes up in my head whenever I think about these head coaches who are basically, called the next big thing or a great offensive genius head coach, like guys like Matt LaFleur or McCarthy when he was in Green Bay. How much of it is the quarterback? I think about Bill Belichick and I'm like, he didn't have a lot of success back in Cleveland. And, all of a sudden Tom Brady comes in and, their dynasty. And I'm like, how much of that is just really Tom Brady? And he's just along for the ride. We saw it this season. Bill Belichick did a really good job, which is one of the reasons why he's my coach of the year. But that's a story for a different day. How much of it is Aaron Rodgers? How much of his success can we really put on Aaron Rodgers? We said anywhere Aaron Rodgers goes, you're going to get 11 wins at least, regardless of what team he's on.
Maybe not. So
how much of this?
Maybe not Detroit.
Listen, I'm going to be the good cop here, okay? Because I saw a video on Twitter someone posted, a Detroit Lion fan who was watching that Rams-Bucks game, and he had the exact same reaction that I had watching the game at home on that last play. We'll get into that game in a little bit, but I got a lot of love for Lion fans because of that guy. So I'm not going to sit here and trash the Lions. I think the Lions are going to make the Super Bowl at some point.
Will
anyways,
we be alive?
Stop trying to make me the mean guy. Okay, I just said I like the Lions and their
Rams
fans.
Games like last week. I don't even think you're going to make it to another 2 or 3 years.
Listen, I got one more thing to give you before we move on to the next game, okay? And I'm only throwing this one out there. Well, you know why. You'll know why I'm throwing it out there, okay? But in 6 of 8 postseason matches between these 2 teams, the 49ers and the Green Bay Packers, the winning team lost in the following matchup. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, you're holding on to that stat hard because the other ones don't favor you.
Hey, that's the one. That's the one that I wrote down. That's the one I'm gonna keep reading pretty much all week long.
If I had known that was coming, I'd pull the whole list of things
No,
to go the exact opposite way.
No, I know. You don't have to talk about those. Okay, we'll move on.
All right, let's move on to the next game. And the reason we're a couple days late is the Achilles heart has just started to rebeat here. It was fluttering nicely for the first half, basically for the first three quarters, probably basically until the last 4 minutes of the game, pretty much. And then I'm not sure if it's still on a regular heartbeat, but it at least is normalized off a little bit here. But the Rams win 30-27, totally dominate this game. Pretty much throughout, the defense was just ridiculously good throughout. And if it wasn't for the offense, basically, I think purposely trying to lose this game, they would have dominated this one. But Rams got out to a really hot start. They went with the passing game plan early, which I really, really liked. Aggressive downfield throws, beat up on this Tampa Bay secondary, where I thought they had good matchups, both Cooper Kupp and Odell Beckham Jr. really, really well. Higbee had some nice plays over the middle. Just loved the game plan early. But per the Rams, basically all season long, I think one thing went wrong. And that turned into a giant avalanche where everything started to go wrong there. Brady couldn't do anything in that first half. He throws I thought that was just a terrible pick, a flutter ball up, out of your own end zone there. Rams get the ball. And then I thought they got a little too cute there. And the fumble right before the goal line where they were trying to sort of score with 0-0-0 on the clock. I don't think it changed the whole game, but it sort of flipped everything, and everything sort of started to lead to a bad territory there. But Rams end up getting the walk-off field goal. But what did you make of this game?
Listen, I believe that the text message chain that you and I had going back and forth started off with, this is how you're supposed to start the game. They got to keep this type of pressure on. They got to stay aggressive. And then it proceeded to, oh, F no. What the F is going on? Are you effing kidding me? WTF. And what the heck is going on? I believe that's the way it went. Listen, the Rams came out. They started off really hot defensively. I think that they're probably the best defense that's still available in the playoffs, even though the Niners had a pretty good defense themselves. And obviously the Bills had probably the number one defense in the league. But, we saw how that turned out.
True.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a little bit.
For the upcoming game.
But listen, the Rams defense, they've been playing lights out pretty much all throughout these playoffs. And I know it's only 2 games, but, they matter. I think Matthew Stafford did a really good job. I talked about it in the pregame show that we did, that I thought in order for the Rams to win this game, there had to be good balance. I understand the way you attack this Tampa team is through the air because that's where their weakness is. That's where they're banged up. But you could not get away from the balance. We saw it in that 49er game. The Rams got up pretty early on. They got aggressive. And in that second half, the balance wasn't there. So what happened? The Niners got back into it, and they're able to win the game. And now we're facing the same team that just came back on us week 18 of the season. We're facing them in the NFC Championship game. So obviously it was a big thing. They were able to stay balanced. I believe Cam Akers got 24 rushes for only 48 yards, which is a really low average. It's a 2.0 average, per carry. But this is the thing. It was very important for them to stay balanced because that's the only reason they were. I know a lot of people didn't like some of the calls that they had, especially late on in the game when Tampa Bay was really starting to, make a game of it. But I feel like they were necessary. We drained enough clock to get to a point where we had a chance to win the game, and it wasn't being put on Brady's hands to come back and drive down and win the game. We had the ball at the end of the game, which I thought was the most important factor. I got to give Tom Brady some credit, man. And I told you, we in our text message, we'll go back and forth. You can't give him an inch. You give this guy a hand, he takes a whole freaking arm. Okay, there's one of the reasons why this guy's considered the GOAT. He's going to make everyone around him better. And even, though we got Jalen Ramsey, probably the best cornerback in the league, he's going to find a way to get a ball to his guy, which he did. And Mike Evans had a pretty good game too. Now, some of them obviously weren't on Ramsey, but a couple of them were. And it's the chemistry between, Evans and Brady. Gronk, got in the game a little bit, not as much as they would have liked to. Obviously, he had a lot of targets. He just couldn't convert those to catches because that Rams defense was on him pretty much all night long.
Yeah, definitely so. Let's get into a couple key points in this one. Certainly that drive right before the half. I talked about it. I just thought they went into their conservative shell trying to bleed that whole clock because they didn't want to, give Brady the ball back. But that's where I'm like, read the temperature of this game right now. The way that defense is playing, basically, I think you wanted Brady on the field with the way those Rams were rushing the passer. And so I was like, get that ball in the end zone, punt the ball off. If he has a minute, he has a minute. Trust your defense, which is basically, I think he had 3 completions at that point of the game. He wasn't doing anything. So I just didn't like it. Now, granted, the fumble was a little bit fluky there, but I just thought they had success being aggressive, and they had sort of pulled back and went into they weren't playing up tempo, but they were playing at a fast, aggressive pace, and I thought they got to the about the 20, the 15, and they just sort of slowed it down. And I thought that was a mistake. It sort of let the Tampa Bay defense set up, not be on their heels. And that led to, where they could make a play, which they made the play and got the fumble, which that's when our text message was like, man, you got to put your foot on these guys' throats. Just keep scoring points. Stop, playing the clock. The way you beat this team, score, 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 make them have to, throw the ball. They ended up having to throw 55 times versus defense, which led to, probably the win overall. But I thought that's where it started. What'd you make of that, series of plays down there right before the halftime where you got the fumble right there?
I thought it was huge because, as you mentioned, listen, they got a little conservative now. I did say that there had to be some balance, but, I'm also a big believer in being a little more run heavy in the second half of the game once, you've got control of the game, which is exactly where the Rams were. They were in position to take complete control of that game. And then you can come out of the second half and be more conservative. That's when you can switch it over. That first half, they came out aggressive and it was working for them. Matthew Stafford was making big plays. And even though the running attack wasn't spectacular, the passing game was making up for the lack of a running game. And then that fumble by Cam Akers at the 1 yard line completely shifted momentum because you go at that point from being up 3 scores. What was it, 17-3 at that point?
It was 20-3 at that point. So it would have been 27-3.
You can make it very easily make it a 4-score game. And, then you have Brady playing catch up in the second half where you can completely switch your game plan to conservative game plan. And Brady's going to want to throw the ball. So then you can really pin your ears back and get after this guy. Listen, this Rams defense, they had pressured Brady 17 times, the most he's faced pretty much all year long. And it impacted him. Now, they didn't put as much pressure on him in that second half, which I was a little confused about because that first half, at one point, he had negative offensive yards. That's how much pressure they were putting on him. And then you come back and you look at his numbers for the end of the game. He had 329 yards and a touchdown, and then that one pick, obviously. But, he got all his yards in that second half pretty much. And that's because they took the aggressive meter down on defense, and they took the aggressive meter down on offense, which I'm okay with on offense. But defensively, you got to stay on it. And I think I told you the Rams are a little infuriating as a fan. Because it seems like they've got so much talent on that team that at times they get bored. You go back to that Niner game where they were up 17-3 at halftime, and they basically had that game in the bag. And then they come out second half and they look like a different team. They don't look like the same team that went into the locker room. Now, it works sometimes, when it's a close game. McVay has a good tendency to really get these guys fired up and get them to stay in the game. But when they're dominating a game, it seems like they come back that second half a little too relaxed. I'd like for that to change, especially going into the NFC Championship game. But listen, ultimately they got the win. They had some big mistakes. That first half, as you mentioned, wasn't closed out the way we would have liked, but they were able to overcome, which is I think an important factor in the playoffs.
Yeah. Let me go to the next sort of, to compound that, they come out off that first drive, do get the touchdown. If you had gotten that touchdown right before the half, that's 35-3. And that is a game over. But they got up 27-3. And really, there's nothing they could have done except start turning the ball over. And I mean, not even turning the ball over, because I think if you turned it over in your half of the field, I don't think the Bucs were capable of making long drives. I mean, you look at their scoring drives. You have the Fournette touchdown, 7 plays, 30 yards. That was off the Cooper Kupp fumble. You have the one Mike Evans long pass that was 3 plays, 77 yards, but 55 of that was off the, one play off Mike Evans. We'll get into what that defensive decision was at, 3 minutes. And then you have the 7 plays, 30 yards once again with 42 seconds to tie the game. That was off the other Cam Akers fumble. So basically, this whole game, Tampa Bay proved to you that they were not capable of taking the ball from the Tampa Bay side into the Rams territory, making a full long drive and scoring touchdowns. So I agree, it was all right to go conservative offense. It's just you can't make those turnovers. And they made the turnovers and came back. The Cooper Kupp one was really probably him just being a little bit over-aggressive, trying to, stretch out a play that was dead. And him get a first down, which I don't know if you can fault too much because, he hit a 3rd and 20, I think, in this game, doing the same sort of thing. Granted, they left him single coverage for some reason. We'll come back to that once again. There were a handful of times they left him single covered. Why you leave one of the top 3 receivers in the game single covered, I don't know. But, hey.
The Triple Crown winner at that.
Whatever you want to do. But... basically at 27-13, it stayed that way. Probably the biggest turning point is when they forced that fumble with Brady, and then, of course, the next play, snap over their head, and they turn it right back over. I think we did have to get the paddles out for you after that, because I think you took an exhale breath and like, all right, we're fine now. And then one play later... You're like, crap, we're still having to fight this off. But that's what at 3:20, before the Mike Evans pass, 3:20 left of the game. It's 27-13. There's really not much of a chance of comeback. And they get into that defense where they single cover Mike Evans. No safety help. I get it, Jalen Ramsey, one of the best corners, you're willing to do that. But this is game situation once again. The only thing that can hurt you here, Tampa Bay didn't have any timeouts, is one big explosive play. Only thing that can hurt you. I'm not saying go into the Buffalo Bills prevent defense here, but I mean, how about just a little help on a guy?
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. On a guy who main thing is catching jump balls. He's probably the best receiver at catching jump balls since Calvin Johnson came in the league. So Ramsey, who had, I wouldn't say great coverage on that one, but still you're leaving him exposed. Even if the throw isn't that good, Mike Evans can jump up there and get the ball. I did not understand that defense at that point in time whatsoever.
Listen, you mentioned it the last time we were talking, as we were kind of going back and forth, about the game when we saw each other afterwards on that Monday morning. And you said, I don't understand why you'd switch Ramsey onto Evans instead of using 2 guys with, using a corner on Evans and then have safety help over the top. And then just have Ramsey lock the one guy down by himself.
Yeah, the only one
I don't understand either.
Scotty Miller was hurting anyone on that day was Chris Collinsworth, who, I don't know, saw a fellow white receiver. And
he reminds him of himself. No, but listen, again, a lot of this, you can't count Tom Brady out. If you give him, an inch to breathe, he's going to try and make plays, and that's just what he did. But listen, if this was the regular season, I'd be trashing the Rams for the way they almost gave that game away. But listen, Von Miller said it. This is the playoffs. It's never perfect, but what matters is the win. So now they advanced. They showed a lot of good things. They obviously got some things to clean up, but if we don't have those four fumble loss,
this
is a complete domination. Exactly.
Yeah, it's 42-10 or something.
We're talking about the most exciting, divisional round weekend in recent history, at least. They were all one-score games, but realistically speaking, this game could have very easily been a blowout.
Yeah,
very easily. And that's a little bit shocking when you talk about the defending Super Bowl champs. Now, I know they're banged up. I know they had some guys recently come back. So there's that whole dynamic of, meshing and that flow, the natural flow when you've been playing together for a long time. So I get all that. But this is defending champs with, Tom Brady, number 12 in the back. Like, I don't know. It felt like it was the right way to end it in a close matchup. Just because, it's such a special season in the sense that we don't know what Brady's going to do now. We don't know. I don't know if you heard his latest thing on the podcast he does with Larry Fitzgerald, but it kind of sounds like he's getting ready to call it quits.
I think he's probably. I think this is it. I think he reads the tea leaves with Tampa Bay that this run's probably done. I mean, there will be no Antonio Brown next year, obviously.
Sorry to cut you off. Sorry, but real quick. Did he join Baltimore?
No, I don't think he did. I think
he tweeted a picture of himself in a Baltimore uniform.
Lamar was, doing some fun stuff. He's going to regret that.
Is that considered tampering?
I don't think so because he's a free agent. But, Godwin will maybe be back at some point. Now, granted, they franchised him, so that's completely up in the air, based off how he progresses off injury and whether they, give him a contract because he was under the franchise tag. You still got Evans there, but I think you see a little bit of diminishment every time with Evans where he's sort of more just, going into a phase like where Des Bryant went towards the back end where it's pretty much all jump balls. You basically send him down there. He's got a huge, big body, and he can get those. But I don't think he's quite as open as he used to be. Gronk looked, I thought, pretty creaky towards the end. I don't know if you have to do where you give him a year off and then he comes back for the rest of his career. He's just every other year type of tight end so he can fully heal. Fournette and Ronald Jones, and then that defense. At some point, those guys are all going to want to be paid a lot. So I just wonder if he's reading the tea leaves here. I don't know if he'll want to go to another team, so that would be the only thing. But I think he reads it and probably reads this Tampa Bay team and saw it just like you did, if not for stupid turnovers. I mean, this game's 42-10.
Now, listen, I know that, they don't take voting during the postseason. It's all done, during the regular season. But I think that this pretty much solidified the fact that at the very least, Cooper Kupp should earn Offensive Player of the Year, at the very least. We saw the top MVP candidates basically get booted out of the playoffs at this point, and both in pretty bad performances compared to what we're used to seeing from them. Whereas in Cooper Kupp, you know that he's the guy. He's the guy you got to lock down on, the guy you got to key on. He had a big game, 9 catches, 183 yards, and 1 touchdown on 11 targets. And another guy that I want to talk about that we really haven't talked about much this season, he's been really quiet, and that's a good thing, is Odell Beckham Jr. He made some big plays, some big catches, some nice sideline catches to keep the chains moving in this game. And I think that he deserves a little bit of credit here, not being a distraction, which is something that we're used to. OBJ, he's used to being a big personality in the locker room, and it's not something that I'm really getting from him here in LA. He ended up the game with 6 catches, 69 yards on 8 targets. So not a monster game, but still a very productive day for him. And he did have some key situations there. So I thought I'd give them a little bit of love.
Yeah, definitely. So let me get to the last 2 big plays here. I mentioned about Derrick Henry sort of wearing down in that second half. Akers has another fumble, which led to, Fournette's drive there. I just thought it was weird that they rode Akers, 24 carries on there, one for Sony Michel, when, probably since, I don't know, week 8, week 9, Sony played pretty well. I mean, Sony is not going to dazzle you with, wow, explosive plays. But I just thought it was weird that basically you take a running back who had missed the whole year, still coming off Achilles recovery, and you make him pretty much play that whole game. And I thought fatigue probably played a little bit on that fumble as well, where he's just a little too tired to get that second arm on the ball. He's trying to grind out yards, body a little fatigued, popped out. I just didn't understand why they didn't split the carries a little more that way, especially since you pretty much knew no matter what, it was probably going to be 3 yards, no matter who your running back was at that point.
Listen, I think I have an explanation for that, okay? And I think the way it is that first fumble, I think was kind of, it could have gone either way. It just happened. Guy just happened to land on his head. He didn't land on any other body part prior to the ball coming loose. It could happen to anybody. I think, 95 out of 100 times he holds on to the ball or a different part of the body hits the ground
before
first.
The ball comes out.
Correct. So that one I'm not putting too much on, but I think that because he didn't play all season long, because he's coming off injury, the coaching staff really wanted to keep him motivated and keep him on a positive note. So they wanted to keep him confident. So what do you do? What do you do to keep a guy confident? You scratch out that last mistake and you keep feeding him as if nothing's ever happened. We go back to the regular season and Sony Michel, and I believe I was one of the few people that said I'd rather have Darrell Henderson running the ball as opposed to Sony Michel. I don't see that oomph from Sony Michel. I don't see that burst. And you're right. He's not flashy. He's not going to dazzle you, with glitz and glamour, because that's not the type of running back he is. He's a grinding running back. He's the kind of running back that when he falls forward. He's going to get you 2 yards, even if he gets stopped at the line of scrimmage. That's the type of running back he is, and that's how he played. He played really good football, enough to where I thought he deserved to get the start for, towards the end of the year. Now we're here in the playoffs, and again, I think they're trying to keep Akers confident because in McVay's mind and in the rest of the coaching staff, Cam Akers is a difference maker. He's a home run hitter. He's a big playmaker, and if you can utilize him in a game, almost like the Titans with Derrick Henry. He's a big play guy. And that's, I think, why they're utilizing him the way they are. But I think this next game for San Francisco, I think that they're going to go with a little more balance. I still think Cam Akers is going to be the featured back, but I think they're going to try and balance the carries a little bit more because it's definitely a huge stark difference between the amount of work that he got, Sony Michel, and the amount of Cam Akers got.
He didn't even have, a handful of regular season games like Henry had. I just thought it was weird. It's like, basically second game back. And you sort of even scratch that Arizona game. That whole second half was basically, an exhibition game. Those aren't real, game carries. I just thought it was weird that you take a guy who probably isn't in NFL football game shape, you throw him into the biggest pressure situation in the playoffs, and you're like, here, have 25 carries, Sony have 1. I just thought maybe it's 8 carries for Sony, 16, 17 for Akers. I thought that probably would have helped. I don't know if it would have saved the fumble. It seemed like throwing him right into the, deep in there, probably not the greatest strategy.
But you're right, though. That second fumble did seem like a lot of it had to do with fatigue. Yeah. I don't know if he was fatigued, but that's just what it looked like as a fan watching the game.
Yeah, it just looked like he got a little sloppy, and that's what happens when you get fatigued. Ball sticks out a little bit. You don't want to, put that other hand on it. Your people are grabbing at your legs. You don't quite have the drive you had at the beginning of the game, stuff like that. We'll now hammer Tampa Bay's poor defensive strategy here that led to the Rams' win. First off, when Stafford scrambles forward and drops the ball, where was your head at that point in time?
Listen, it's not where my head was. It's where my heart was. My heart was literally down on the floor, soaking my Nike Rams, custom shoes with blood because I thought the season was over at that point.
Yeah.
Listen, I got to give Stafford a lot of credit. Okay, he came into these playoffs not ever winning a playoff game before, and the big question mark with him was, can this guy win a playoff game? Now, when the Rams brought him in at the beginning of the year, everyone kept saying Super Bowl or bust, Super Bowl or bust. How can you make the narrative it's Super Bowl or bust in the beginning of the year, and then we get into the playoffs, and the narrative is we don't know if this guy can win because he's never won a playoff game. You can't, really switch it up, especially when the Rams started the season off super hot and ended kind of lukewarm, so to speak. But listen, Stafford led his 43rd career game-winning drive, which is the most since 2009 when he came into the league. And we're talking, this is including playoffs. A guy who's been in 3 playoff games prior to that and lost all of them. He leads the NFL in game-winning drives. So there's definitely something there. I just don't think he's ever really had a chance to show it. And now he's got a really good team around him, and he's got the ability when he's playing the right type of way, when there's balance on the team. This is the type of performance that we can expect from Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, definitely so. All right. We'll get to the next 2 plays after the scary fumble there. If it wasn't the Bucks go, leave Cooper Kupp, uncovered for a 20-yard pass. I get it, 20-yard pass that, brings the clock down, a little bit. Granted, the Rams, the one thing I will say, at least had a timeout to play with there off the, Matthew Stafford sack there. So it saved him a handful of time. You get burned once, Cooper Kupp 20 yards. I am okay with it. They were on the 24-yard line there. It brings it to the 40. Not, I'd say, too much to worry about, especially since you just watched Matt Gay somehow come up short on a 47-yard field goal.
Yeah, what was that about? How was that even?
I don't know.
I thought it was good.
They flashed some graphic where he kicks 60% in Tampa Bay because that's where he originally started, and 93% everywhere else. So clearly there is something in his head there. So, I think anything 50 plus, you were probably okay. Giving up there. I don't know if Matt Gay would have been able to hit it, especially since we just saw him come up short on a 47-yarder. It's probably the early 90s, the last time I saw an NFL kicker come up short on a 47-yarder. But, the next play is the Cooper Kupp basically runs down, I don't know, untouched, unmolested the whole way, just with one safety deep, one-on-one. And I will say Matthew Stafford stepped up, hit the perfect throw there. But I need your explanation of what the hell defense Tampa Bay was in and why you're all out blitzing and leaving one of the best receivers uncovered with just a safety over the top.
Listen, the only explanation that I could come up with is the fact that I talked about it, during the pregame show that we did. Is one of the ways that you affect Matthew Stafford is by pressuring him. The offensive line has had its struggles throughout the season as far as protecting Matthew Stafford is concerned. And I think that, they brought the corner on the blitz, which basically left the safety one-on-one with Cooper Kupp. And
who was also 40 yards off him, so Cooper Kupp had basically a runway fighter jet.
Yeah, and listen, there's a lot of talented safeties out in the NFL, but, there's very few safeties, especially this year, that can keep up with Cooper Kupp one-on-one. And it was just, I have no clue why that was a call on defense. That the one thing you can't have is to give up something deep. That's it. Just don't give up anything deep. Keep everything in front of you so that you make it at the very least a very tough long field goal, which Matt Gay already missed. Now, speaking of Matt Gay, how good must it feel for him to kick that game-winning field goal, from the same team that basically cut him, and now he's with the new team,
I'm just glad it
eliminating
was
the team
30
that cut him.
yards and not
Not
45
37.
plus.
I don't know how he was short. I have no explanation for that one. But listen, I can't explain to you what the defensive coverage on that was, or what at least the thought process was for calling that defensive play. But it worked out in our favor because Cooper Kupp was able to get free, and Matthew Stafford hit for that big bomb, which basically I stood up at that moment and I'm screaming like that Lions fan was that I spoke about a little while ago, and I'm screaming, clock it, clock it, clock it. And my wife is looking at me like I'm some insane guy who just left the loony bin because I'm jumping literally 16 inches off the ground. Well, no, it's 16 is not very high, but I'm jumping really high off the ground, and I'm swinging my arms and I'm going crazy saying, clock it, clock it. And I even thought that Matthew Stafford might take a risk. I don't know if you noticed, but there was a defensive lineman for Tampa Bay that was way behind on that play. And he could have, taken a knee on that play, or he could have clocked the ball, and it would have been an offsides penalty. So you would have got an extra 5 yards on that. But in fact, he waited till everybody was properly set, so there was no penalties for either side, and they were able to kick the game-winning field goal. So, but yeah, I can't explain it. I can't.
Yeah. It's just come in with your size and your 16-inch vertical. Your combine score doesn't leave you with a very high grade, just to let you know.
There's a reason why this is the football that I'm tossing around, and not a professional NFL-sized football.
All right. Well, the Rams make it interesting, but get the win to the conference championship game versus the 49ers. We'll get into that over the weekend here and see if we have a feel on this one, and can the basically curse be broken on that one. So you thought the Rams game was an interesting one. Well, the Chiefs-Bills turned out to be the game of games to watch. Chiefs win in overtime on a walk-off. I think after watching this game, I think we've sort of moved on from the old guard of quarterbacks here, pretty much officially. Brady, Rodgers, Manning and Breeze haven't been in the league, now for a little bit. But I think these two are sort of the new era that has sort of put themselves. These are the best quarterbacks in the league. When you have these two guys, you're winning 10 to 15 games no matter what, and your team has a chance for a Super Bowl. Before we dive into the game, the way both guys played was just at a freaking ridiculous level. It's sort of sad that one of these guys was going home after watching this play.
Yeah, definitely. So listen, we talked about how this whole divisional round was basically walk-off games all for all four games, but this probably had, as a Ram fan, obviously I took more excitement in my Rams team, but if you're just an NFL fan just watching football, this was the game of the week. This game had everything you could have wanted. It had, plays on defense.
After we've just spent like an hour 20 breaking down the other three games, this was the game of the week.
Yeah, this was definitely the game of the week, man. But listen, we had a few defensive plays, which are always nice to see in playoff games. But if you're a fan of offense, man, this game just had it. It had everything you could ever want. This was also the first playoff game in history to feature two quarterbacks that threw for 5 touchdowns or more in their previous playoff game. So you knew that we were going to have some firepower coming into this matchup. The question was which defense will do enough to slow the other team down. But obviously, we know what happened, but let's get into it.
Yeah, so this thing started off, Bills came out real aggressive, 2 fourth down, plays. You saw, Josh Allen lower his head and start, laying down the boom there. And I was like, this is a good sign for Buffalo. They're going to open it here, and they're going to try to beat this Chiefs team. And, you had that, but then, of course, the Chiefs come right back down, put together an 11-play, 74-yard dive, tie it up. And I thought that's where sort of things got a little bit weird, where we didn't get, the fireworks of the last, basic 3 minutes of this game. it sort of, I thought, turned in the Chiefs' favor here, where the Chiefs started playing a long possession, long drive game. They had that 11-play, 74, 5-minute touchdown drive. Next one down, 12 plays, 86 yards, 6:51 comes off the clock. And I thought, Buffalo sort of was okay playing that. Probably to protect their defense a little bit, thinking the less it was on the field, the less it got exposed, which, sort of held true in the last 2 minutes in the overtime there. But I also thought it hurt the Bills here. I think in that first series when Mathau went out, I thought that left Kansas City secondary totally exposed. And I'm just curious your thoughts on this. I thought at that point, I thought Buffalo sort of just opened this puppy up and, sort of went defense be damned. We're turning this into the biggest shootout ever. And they sort of, crept along and played, that long possession game with Kansas City until those final, 5 minutes when they were like, all right, we have to get this. And then they started, being real aggressive, playing fast paced. And that's when this game opened up. Now, that being said, the Buffalo defense got totally exposed and probably is what cost them the game there. But I thought they had a shot there once Mathau went down to turn this into a shootout. And I think offensively, I thought Buffalo would have been more able to win a shootout than Kansas City. I'm curious your thoughts there, or did you like sort of Buffalo's game plan here, keeping this tight until basically the last 5 minutes of the game?
Listen, I think it's really hard to fault or point fingers and say that they could have done this differently and they probably would have had more success, because realistically speaking, if it wasn't for the fact that Kansas City scored that touchdown in that late in that game, then, Buffalo gets another shot and who knows what's going to happen. They're both having a lot of success, at getting into the end zone late in that game. I think the biggest difference in this game, realistically, is exactly what we keep talking about when we talk about this Buffalo Bills team. It's the lack of a running attack through a running back, because Josh Allen did his thing. Okay. Yeah. He made big plays, as you mentioned. He was, no pun intended, he was ramming people, he was putting his head down. He was running through defenders. I mean, it's kind of satisfying to watch, a quarterback who is usually, at least, in reference to size, smaller than some of these defenders, and they kind of slide and take a knee to avoid being hit by these guys. To have a quarterback that's heftier than these defensive players, just put his head down and he's running through you. He's going to try and get to where he's trying to get to, whether it's through you or around you, it doesn't matter. But I think that was the biggest difference. You look at Kansas City side of the ball here. They had 60 yards from Lair. They had 24 yards from McKinnon. And then Patrick Mahomes himself had 69 yards rushing. Now, we know Patrick Mahomes is a great athlete. We know he can run the ball, he can get out, and he get big chunks of play. We just don't see it as often because they do a really good job of keeping him safe and protecting him. For the Bills, Allen had 68 yards rushing. That's 6.2 with all the carries. He had 6.2 yards per carry average. His running backs, on the other hand, Singletary had 26 yards, 2.6 yards per carry. That's just not going to cut it.
90% of that also on that first drive.
Yeah, and that's just not going to cut it. When you don't have to worry about the running back. And listen, he only got 5 targets in this game. He caught 4 of those, so at least he helped a little bit in that sense. But it's almost like you're Xing out a player you no longer have to account for when you don't have a productive running back there. You can't have the quarterback be the most productive running back. I know it looks nice, and we constantly praise Allen for being such a good athlete, but it's not good for him and his team when he is the main, source of rushing yards. You can't. I got some stat here somewhere. Josh Allen led the Bills in passing and rushing in 4 of 6 career playoff games.
Yeah.
How many playoff games has he won? That tells you all you need to know. But yeah. that tells you all you need to know. There's a reason why there's no Super Bowl there. It's because he's having to do everything. And it goes back to the preseason when we started talking about this team, will Singletary step up the way we expected him to step up the year before? Obviously, he didn't do that. He had big games. I'm not taking that away from him. He had big moments where he made some big plays. But look at the stats, man. both these teams performed really well offensively. The biggest key difference in this is the running backs. Kansas City was able to get more production out of their running backs, and then you take, Patrick Mahomes, who's also rushing the ball, and it adds a different dynamic that the defense, which the Bills defense was one of the top defenses in the league all year long, now has to account for not just a successful running attack, but a successful running attack from the quarterback, and then not just that, a passing attack. With Kelsey was on, Hill was on. I mean, they were just doing a really good job offensively at keeping the Bills defense on their toes, and they just didn't know how to react. And I think that was the biggest difference in this game.
Yeah, definitely so. All right, let's jump to some key points. And, basically, until that, last, 6-7 minutes of the fourth quarter, I don't think there were a ton of key points. They sort of played solid defense. Both teams were trying to make plays. Hardeman hit that nice 25-yard run to make it 23-14. You wondered if that was it. Buffalo then hit that one-play 75-yard pass to Gabriel Davis. 23-21 game on. And here's where I think the game flipped, in a couple different ways. Bills punt the ball. Andy Reid, who, I think previous to his Chiefs tenure, we probably hammered about, his postseason coaching. But the move to put Tyreek Hill back there and return punts, which you don't do in the regular season for obvious reasons. But I thought he read the tea leaves in this game and was smart to make that move. Has a huge punt return, which I think I'll talk about here, on the field goal with 13 seconds left, which might have played, into the head of McDermott and the coaching. But the Bills defense steps up, 4 plays, 6 yards. We can probably get into the decision on third down. We hammered them for, running out of the shotgun. They didn't run out of the shotgun, but they did put Blake Bell in an option play on, a third down. And I think it was about 2. So, backup tight end, option play. Not quite in love with that call when Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Tyreek Hill are pretty much destroying everything you're doing in life. But, I think people are hammering, but they might not know. But Blake Bell was a quarterback at Oklahoma. He switched over to tight end his last year. So it wasn't a scary decision in that he can't take a snap or run the option. He was basically an option quarterback in college up until, that point. So just a weird play call. Bills get the stop, field goal, 26-21. They're right there. They have that ridiculous 17-play drive the Bills do that takes up 7 minutes, get the touchdown. You think game over. What did you make of that series of plays before we get into the Tyreek Hill, Gabriel Davis, who's going to be a fun trivia question for you in 20 years when I say, do you remember Gabriel Davis and the 200 yards and 4 touchdown game he had in divisional round? But that series, what'd you make there? At that point, did you think the Bills had this at 29-26 with about a minute left in this game?
Now, listen, I'll be open here. I had a parlay that I did prior to us doing our pregame show, in which I was just going with gut picks. And in that parlay, I had the Niners, I had the Rams, I had the Bills, and I had the Titans. Obviously, 2 of those didn't turn out the way I thought. But as those plays were happening, the ones you just mentioned, I thought, man, the Bills are going to win this game. I really thought
they were
that
ready to win the Super Bowl after that 17-play, 75-yard drive.
Yeah, it looked like they were finally taking control of the game. They were locking down clock management. They were locking down, moving the chains. They were really wearing down that defense to the point where I thought, this is where the game's going to turn. This is where it's no longer, in Patrick Mahomes' hand. It's in Josh Allen's hand. It's in his legs. They're going to wear down this defense to where from this moment on, they're not going to be able to stop anything that these guys try to do. Now, obviously, that wasn't the case, which you'll get into more. But I really thought that was a turning point and that the Bills were going to win that game. But obviously, that's not how it worked out.
So the Chiefs get the ball back, and once again, I think this is going to play into that decision on the kick we'll get into. But, they hit Hill on a 64-yard pass for a touchdown. Takes up, 50 seconds. That leaves about a minute on the clock here. My question on this play here is they blew a little bit of a defensive coverage. They were supposed to double him over the middle. The safety went to an outside receiver. But that trailing corner was right behind him, and he sort of tried to grab Hill but missed. But my question is, at that point, when you see what's opening up and you see that sort of runway that Tyreek Hill had, basically you give him that runway. You aren't going to stop him. I don't care how many people are sitting back there at the goal line. I don't understand at that point where you just don't concede it. Tackle him, pass interference, 15 yards. Eat that play and don't let him catch that ball at that point. I get it that a ton of stuff is going on and you're having to try to think in that, split-second moment. But, that's sort of the decision that turns a game. You make that tackle, him, pass interference penalty, maybe you hold on and win this game. But, yeah, 64-yard play by Tyreek Hill. Just a ridiculous play to put the Chiefs back on top here.
Yeah, listen, as you mentioned, for a lot of these players, automatically going for a penalty when you're beat is not exactly the first thing they have in mind. You could probably attest to this a lot more than I can, as you watch a lot more college football than I do. But there's a lot of instances where I've seen college games where the defender knows he's getting beat.
Yeah.
And his first instinct is grab on, take the flag, take the penalty. It's better because especially in college where they don't do spot penalties, it's better to take the 10, 15 yards so that you're going to get penalized.
Especially since that was about a 12-yard cross, so it's not even going to affect you.
Exactly. So it's better to take these penalties than to give these plays. But in that situation, I just don't understand why that wasn't the first thought in their mind. But again, I'm not going to fault them because there's so much going on, as you mentioned, that sometimes it's easy to forget the situational moment that you're in.
Either, because basically
it's literally from the moment that you see the quarterback releasing the ball to know where you're at on the field. So
and
I get
Hill was almost in full sprint there. So
and not just that, once Hill's in full sprint, who's really going to catch him? There's only a handful of people that I feel could potentially catch up to him.
Bolt. I don't know if he can play corner or not.
He's pretty long. He could probably pull it off. Kind of like a Barron type of corner safety, maybe linebacker.
Yeah. All right, so we flip things back over. Bills get the ball with a minute left. Just the grittiest of gritty drives. 4th and 12, and Allen just drills a freaking pass into Gabriel Davis for the touchdown, 36-33. You're thinking he's golden. And at this point, I really do. I'm like, oh my God, Buffalo's going to win the Super Bowl this year. They're locked in. Super Bowl champ Buffalo Bills. And I was like, that's kind of fun. It's ridiculous to pull this game out, having to bounce back. And just a crazy great play by Josh Allen and Gabriel Davis, who put that corner right on his butt running that route.
Yeah, now it's crazy to think that, we're literally seconds away from the Bills going to the AFC Championship game. Now, obviously, there's no guarantee that you're going to make it to the Super Bowl. You still have to play against the Bengals team that's probably just as hungry and also has a lot of talent. But, you start thinking about these things. I started thinking about a Bills-Rams Super Bowl. I was like, that'd be interesting to watch, just because it's not something that you're accustomed to seeing all the time. It's also kind of like a feel-good moment for, one of these franchises like the Bills, who how many times they make it to the Super Bowl without winning one? So it's all these things start coming into play. They start playing, things in your head. But obviously, you've got more to talk about. So let's keep going.
All right. So let's go to the decision of decisions here. 13 seconds left. I will.
Not enough time, right?
Yeah. Kansas City did have timeouts. I think people are, brushing past that they had timeouts. So it's not, a Dallas Cowboys situation where you had to run up and spike it. they had timeouts, so they were able to, keep the whole field open and call timeouts after completions. But nonetheless, they still choose to kick the ball out of the end zone. Now, I'm thinking probably not at that time, but with a day or two, I think the coach's decision was Tyreek Hill was back there, able to field a kick. I think basically the last two plays that Tyreek Hill had touched the ball, he had the 64-yard, touchdown off the pass. He had that punt return where he basically weaves through, I think 35 Buffalo Bills players, to get the punt down. And I think it crossed his mind, we don't want Tyreek Hill touching this ball. I don't know if that's the correct decision, but I think that sort of played into it, along with, a couple things that could go wrong with the squib kick there. Maybe it accidentally, hits, one of those up front guys. You give up field position. I don't totally agree with the decision. I think you got to burn as much time off that clock as you can. I mean, even if you have timeouts with 8 seconds left, that's maybe 1.5 plays, which is different than basically the 3 plays they got to run. What'd you make of the decision to kick the ball through the end zone there?
Listen, it was a little weird for me, especially listen, I understand that there's timeouts left on, and what it does is it changes the perception of that defense of what's available to the offense. Yes. Because when you have timeouts,
when it's 8 seconds to 13 and you have timeouts, that's probably 4 plays you can run. And
not just that, you're not limited to just 2. You're not limited to just, going to outside the numbers.
Yeah.
You can go down the middle, or you can, do a screen. There's just the options become more endless, so to speak. So defensively, it makes it a little harder to try and kind of, put together the right type of scheme, the right type of defense to stop, because you don't know exactly what they're going to run with. So I think there was a complication there, but listen, ultimately, we know how it turned out. We know what the ultimate, what the score was at the end of the game here. So it didn't quite work out for the Bills, but I think it's hard to fault them still, just based off the scenario that they were in.
Yeah. Chiefs get the ball, 2 timeouts left. We have to ask, what'd you think of that? I mean, they were in like balloon prevent. They basically just gave up a straight line to both Hill and Kelsey, free 20 yards. I didn't love it because they had 2 timeouts. Once again, I think they'd been scarred a couple times by, big plays hit by them, and they just didn't want to give up the touchdown and lose. But, I thought you needed to be more aggressive, on your corner-wise, and not just give them free 20 yards. Granted, very difficult kick by Buckner. A 50-yard field goal and that sort of thing is not an easy thing, especially since he had missed an extra point and a field goal already. But I just thought you got to be a little bit more aggressive on the corner. Maybe give him a 10-yard window, but to give him 20-yard window back-to-back, I just thought that was way too soft a coverage.
Well, listen, this is the thing. Again, we talked about the timeouts. When you have timeouts, you don't necessarily have to go for the big play. You don't need the chunks, in one single play. Obviously, you need to move the ball, but it opens up things as far as to where you can target the ball, where you can put certain guys at, and I'm not totally opposed to going and prevent defense, because we've trashed several coaches for not going into prevent defense this season, when they should have. But I still think that you probably didn't have to necessarily go into prevent defense at that moment. I think that there's different defensive schemes you could have used.
Soft coverage. Just play,
exactly.
sort of a soft cover to make them, if they get a 10-yard play, that's much different than a 20,
make them throw it down the middle.
Play. Yeah.
Make them throw it down the middle. Make them throw it in front of you. But this is the thing. You also can't let them throw it in front of you with 20 yards in front of you.
Yeah.
That just makes no sense, because at that point, all you need is 2 plays to get within range.
Yeah.
So, like you said, maybe a little more conservative than that. Maybe half of that, 10 yards cushion, where it gives you some room so you don't get beat deep, but it also prevents them from getting all the chunk plays in just 2 plays.
Yeah. It's hard to question. I just thought they were. It seemed like they were okay conceding the field goal as long as they didn't concede, a 64-yard touchdown like they did with Tyreek Hill. It just seemed like they got a little too scared that something really, really bad was going to happen instead of something just bad was going to happen. We won't talk about the overtime because, basically whoever was winning that coin toss was going down the field and scoring a touchdown. I don't think there's any argument about that.
You know what's funny, though? Sorry to cut you off, but I was listening to sports radio after that game, and they brought up that back when the Chiefs lost in overtime, where they didn't get to touch the ball against Brady, I think it was.
Where Clark was offside and he threw that pick.
Yeah, they petitioned the NFL for a rule change, which was basically that both teams during the playoffs would get an equal shot at winning the game, so it wouldn't come down to the coin toss. And you fast forward a couple of years, now they're in that situation. So I'm sure that they were probably thanking the NFL for not listening to the request back when they first put it in.
Yeah. All right. So that's what I want to ask you. Do you like this overtime setup? I mean, we just probably had the greatest 4 minutes we've probably ever watched in a football game here. And basically because Josh Allen caused tails, he never even sees the football. Bills go home. It's hard to figure out a way to do it exactly. You want to say, well, defense stops somebody. But then you're like, well, if Allen had called heads, the Chiefs weren't stopping anybody and they were going home. So I just don't know quite how to do it. I don't think you can do the stupid college overtime team where you start everybody from the 25-yard line. In that game, we'd still be playing today. But nonetheless, should they switch it to where at least both teams touch the ball?
Listen, I understand the argument for that, okay? And if it was my team, I'm sure I'd be clamoring for it. But the truth of the matter is that this is the NFL, and in the NFL, we always say big teams make big plays and big moments. Big players make big plays and big moments. And even though defensively they hadn't really stopped anybody to that point, I still think that, you're talking about overtime now. You're talking about this is it. This is it. Last stand. Either you stop them, hold them to a field goal, or we're done. And I feel like somebody had to step up at that point, and no one did. And, unfortunately for them, the Chiefs ended up with the ball, so they were able to score. And that's just the way it turns out. Like I said, if it was my team, I'm sure I'd cry for it. But it's not my team. And I think I'm taking more of a neutral position here. And I think that, maybe we should just keep things the way they are. At some point, you have to put something on the defense. There's got to be, a reason for the defense being on there. Otherwise, put the offense out there. And if they can, throw against just 4 corners and 3 wide receivers and score, then, there's just so many different ways you could go about it is what I'm trying to say. So I think we leave things the way they are. It was a great game, and a lot of people will be talking for a long time, but we move on from there. I think the biggest thing here is, a question that I want to ask you. We talked about home field advantage prior to the playoffs starting. Yeah. And we
How did that really work out this weekend?
Yeah, it didn't really matter much this week, right? But, I was looking at the stats here, and Sean McDermott, he is 0-4 in road playoff games and 3-0 at home.
Yeah.
How much of that, whole game would have played out differently had the Bills been at home?
I don't know. I think it probably would have played out sort of like it played out. I just, maybe because the weather probably would have been really, really bad, we wouldn't have gotten the offensive type shootout. But, I talked about it earlier. I think not having it as shootout sort of favored the Chiefs. So I think they were better at playing sort of those long drive possession games. Which sort of lends itself to, you saw it going before the, fourth quarter trading of touchdowns. The Chiefs had a slight advantage playing that sort of more slow, up-tempo, long drive game. So maybe it would have helped because the Bills fans are crazy and, a couple of noise penalties maybe on the Kansas City Chiefs. But overall, I just don't think it affects anything anymore. We'll probably get into it when we talk about the Rams-Niners games. But with all these second-tier ticket sites and reselling, basically in any one of these cities, Kansas City sits in the middle. There are fans from all over that area that can buy tickets and come in. It's not just sort of a local thing anymore, other than maybe in Buffalo, who no one is traveling up to. You're sort of insular in your Buffalo Bill fandom, because I doubt anyone from, like New York City is coming up to, be a Buffalo Bill fan.
Well, first of all, that's assuming that anyone from New York City would have a reason to go to a playoff game in Buffalo.
Yeah, see, that's what I mean. So I think any of these, big time towns like this, I just think.
Sorry, New York fans.
Home field is sort of just lost its luster, because I think the secondary ticket market plays a factor. I mean, just overall comfort has played a factor too. I mean, you go back to the 60s and 70s, these guys are taking bloody buses into their town and sleeping in comfort inns, for God's sakes. Now they're chartering private planes and have sleep coaches and all this. So, it's not so much of a burden, travel-wise, and they're so, in shape and ready. So I think a lot of things play a factor in that, and I don't think there's just really any home field advantage really anywhere other than maybe like a weather game. But you watched it in San Francisco, Green Bay. It probably hurt Green Bay more than it hurt San Francisco, that weather.
Yeah, definitely so.
I did want to bring up one overtime thing that I saw and read. I think 30, 40, maybe 50 years ago, the Patriots were in an overtime game with the old school overtime rules, where they lost and by a field goal, and the owner made a plea to the league that if the team scored, the other team got the ball and had that exact number of plays to score the game.
No, that's a little too wild. I think when you start getting into all these, you can only throw the ball this many times, or this person ran the ball this many times, so they have to. I think that's just going a little too crazy. Listen, it's not perfect. Nothing about the league is perfect, but it's the NFL. We love it. We talk a lot of smack about it, but every year when we get close to the end, we all get really sad, and then we all get really pumped up when it starts up again. So it's working. It's working right now. It's not perfect, but it's working.
I know, but that would be fun as we keep charting how many plays. You could have Tony Romo and Chris Collinsworth with a little ticker. Oh, Mahomes only has 3 more left. Plays to get it into the end zone here.
Yeah, I guess that would be interesting from a fan's perspective, but I think from a like a quarter. Think about it. What if you go into overtime and Patrick Mahomes throws one, or Josh Allen throws one pass to Gabriel, who's a beast that day, and it's one play touchdown. So you can tell me that Patrick
Mahomes launch an 80-yard ball into the end zone.
See, but I think it takes away from the luster of what can happen. When there's one play, I mean, the odds are very unlikely you're going to score. But I mean, I can see how it would be fun.
Yeah, I don't think that rule's getting instituted. It didn't get instituted 50 years ago, so I don't think it's getting instituted now. But nonetheless, great games. Chiefs move on to set up the Bengals-Chiefs matchup that we got a couple weeks ago. So rematches in both. We'll be back Friday or Saturday to do our preview show of the games. Should be an entertaining championship Sunday. Where can we find you, Achilles?
As always, you can find me on Twitter at TDAchilles.
All right. I'm Champ Chesterfield. Be sure to like and subscribe to Greenlight Network so you don't miss any of our shows. Our college basketball show is going on right now. College basketball, the road to madness with Dynamite David, as we start to phase out of football. It's winding down. Phase into college basketball, and maybe phase into a couple other shows. We'll see if we can get Achilles Rain to join with us on some other shows here as the NFL season winds down and he goes into his summer of hibernation.
Yep.
All right, that's our show, and we're out.